It's been over 3 years since we last saw The Mandalorian and Grogu back in season 3, March of 2023. And it's been over 7 years since the last time we saw Star Wars on the big screen with The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. Well, we finally have The Mandalorian Grogu movie on the big screen. So, how well did it translate? Well, stay tuned because this is my full review of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni seem to know what the fans want because they are fans themselves. And as a result, I find that many of their projects that they're involved with has often produced the best results for Star Wars. So the big question coming in for me was, could they take the secret sauce and the magic from the show and translate it appropriately onto the big screen in a movie format? And I think the answer now, after watching it, is a resounding yes, they succeeded. In fact, it felt like watching just 2 or 3 episodes in a row of the show and just kind of confined to that particular story for this movie. The magic of the show was that it focused on one character going through a journey like a spaghetti western and meeting people along the way, fighting different foes along the way, coming across different challenges. They did a good job of taking the spirit of that show and showcasing it on a bigger scale with a bigger budget for this movie. The charm of the show and the franchise is really centered around the Mandalorian's relationship with Grogu. It's a father son relationship, and we love to see that bond form in those interactions because you got Mandalorian, who's a very orderly, very serious, very responsible father figure who's trying to do his best to take care of Grogu. And you got Grogu, who's kind of a silly little baby that gets into a lot of trouble. This movie does a good job of continuing that spirit and highlighting that relationship and putting it first and foremost at the center and at the heart of this film. We'll get into spoilers and plot details later on in the video, but generally speaking, this is set in the backdrop of the aftermath of what happened in season 3 and picks up from where we left off there. And you see Mandalorian and Grogu going on their adventures and basically taking on bounties to capture fugitives left over from the fall of the Empire. Basically, two missions and a decision made in the second mission that leads to consequences that they have to deal with. A problem that I have with some of the more recent Star Wars movies, namely the sequel trilogy, is that they're just trying to do too much with the plot, too much with the characters. There's just always so much going on, a lot to keep up with. With the simplicity of the plot, you're allowed to focus on the relationship and dynamic between our beloved characters and also focus and enjoy the action and the struggle that they encounter along the way. So this movie is very action heavy. There's a ton of action scenes which I thoroughly enjoyed. There's a lot of different dynamics, a lot of different styles and a lot of different types of action sequences, and I really enjoyed seeing our characters interplay with different environments and different characters, and it makes for a very exciting and entertaining movie. But it also kind of dictated the pacing because when you have back to back action sequences, it can make the movie feel too quick as far as the pacing. But also, they did try to slow it down just like they do in the show. But I felt like there was room to do a better job balancing in between scenes and throughout the movie. Whereas it kind of felt like there was a rush of action and then a long, dragged out pause and then a rush of more action towards the end. The visuals were very stunning. It was clear that the big budget production really paid off because you have things that are happening that you've seen happen in the show, but they just happen on a grander scale. It just feels bigger and better. And the action sequences were also very tightly choreographed and just felt very believable, but at the same time, kind of over the top and kind of flashy, but believable within the universe and the confines that we understand as far as their science, as far as their technology, as far as how their physics works. In addition to the visuals, you have some pretty good sound effects as well as the soundtrack. But the soundtrack, although it used some familiar music, it introduced a new track that felt appropriate when they first introduced it in a particular scene, in a particular setting, but then reusing it again throughout the movie felt odd, felt off tone. And you'll see what I'm talking about once you watch the movie. But it just had a weird tone to it that I didn't feel like fit the aesthetic of the rest of the movie or the rest of the scenes. Pedro Pascal is one of those actors that just seems to do no wrong, right? So his character as the Mandalorian is just as charming and just as empathetic as he is in the show. You do get a helmetless scene where you see Pedro's face for a bit, so that was kind of nice. But of course, his character does kind of require him to wear the helmet pretty much at all times if he can help it. So it's still nice to see Pedro. I mean, if you're gonna pay for Pedro, we probably need to see his face in the movie at some point, right? So they do that. But either way, his personality and the way he delivers his lines is so good, even through the helmet, that you still feel like you're rooting for that character every step of the way. Grogu, of course, is as cute and as cuddly as ever. He gets a lot of good laughs in the theater, a lot of funny moments with him. I just wish they allowed him to do a little bit more. I felt like he was relegated to some degree as a sidekick, which is true of the show in most cases, but at least in the show, he had some pretty big moments. And I felt like I was waiting for a big moment with Grogu, and I didn't quite get that satisfaction that he had his big moment to shine. Zev from the Rebels animated show is back. He made a brief appearance in the live action shows as well, but it was great to have him in the movie and have a bigger role as another colleague that's helping out Mando along the way. And he gets some good action in as well. Hopefully, we see some more characters from Rebels. I love that they're kind of crossing over into these other shows as well because those are great characters. And if you watch Rebels, those appearances really do pay off if you're a fan. You also get Sigourney Weaver. She's dishing out the orders and the bounties. I felt like she kind of didn't have a whole lot to say or do and didn't really get a chance to shine. I felt like it was phoned in just a little bit. Her lines felt a little flat. Jeremy Allen White as Rhoda the Hutt was probably the most interesting casting. He is voicing a CGI character, and we all know him best from The Bear, which he was phenomenal in that. So I was curious, like, okay, well, if they're casting that guy to play a voice for a Hutt character, they're doing something special with the Hutt character, and they definitely did. Without spoiling what happens with the character, I felt like his performance of the voice was really well done and turned out to be a good choice. Although I will say the voice wasn't as modulated as I thought it was going to be based on what we've seen in other renditions, such as Jabba the Hutt, obviously. All right, so at this point in the video, I'm going to get into some stuff that may be considered spoilers. I'm going to talk about the details without any filtering. So we open up with a private meeting amongst the other fugitives that are kind of scheming against the Republic, former members of the Empire. There's the main guy who's kind of protecting them and is leading the meeting, and he's trying to be intimidating and that sort of thing. I didn't really like the portrayal of that character. I didn't find it believable. I didn't find it particularly well written. I didn't think the acting was very good. But once Mandalorian showed up with Grogu to just basically take them all out, I was fine with that because it wasn't going to be a character that we're going to see over and over throughout the movie because they killed the guy, right? So, but I wish they got someone that was a little bit more convincing, a little bit more intimidating than the villain that we got at the beginning. Though it was pretty badass to see Mandalorian come in and just take people out so efficiently. I thought he was kind of overpowered, like too proficient at his job at that point. I think the charm of seeing him in the earlier seasons of the show is that, yes, he can take care of business. Yes, he's very cunning and very smart and tactical, but he is not Superman, right? So he's not going around just owning people. He gets beat up, he gets bested a few times, but with a little bit of luck and a little bit of smarts, he finds a way out of the situations and a way to defeat his opponents. But here, it opened up that way, but even throughout most of the scenes, with the exception of the giant snake fight and with the exception of the hand-to-hand combat with the other bounty hunter, which we'll get to, it seemed like he very much had the upper hand and very much was owning rooms full of other troopers shooting at him. And it just felt a little uneven, a little exaggerated as far as his capabilities. And as far as Grogu, again, he was cute in his scenes and he was helpful in some parts, going to that rescue mission to get Mandalorian back after he was captured and healing him and that sort of thing. But I mean, they had that scene where he like strapped up all his gear and his armor and made sure his armor fit appropriately, like instructed. And I was expecting him to have like a big Rambo type moment, but he really didn't. He just kind of followed around and did very minimal, basic things. He didn't have like a big, awesome moment like you would expect. I guess I was just expecting him to have like one big epic scene where he destroys like a whole bunch of different guys, or maybe he takes on one big creature and uses his force or something, or at least use the armor that he strapped up in war. Because as far as I recall, he wasn't even shot at. So the armor was more or less useless as far as seeing it visually used on screen. So I thought that was kind of a letdown. When they raided Lord Janu's mansion or home base or whatever, Zeb got a good scene where he's jumping through the hallways and just taking out a bunch of the stormtroopers as well. Almost reminded me of Nightcrawler from X-Men 2. So Rhoda the Hutt was actually a very surprisingly interesting character. Again, Jeremy Allen White playing him. I see why they chose him, because you needed someone that could sound like a regular dude, someone that was empathetic, someone that you believe was a good-hearted person. Because the character of Rhoda is that he's Jabba's son, but he's trying to distinguish himself and say, I'm not like my father. I'm not my father, right? And he proves that along the way, quickly earning the trust of Mandalorian and the friendship of Grogu, which is very endearing. And I understand what they're going for. His voice was deepened and modulated a little bit, but not a lot, because I guess they wanted him to still sound somewhat human so that he could be more relatable, which they succeeded at. But the fact that he sounded so human was a little off putting, because we're so used to the Hutts sounding like monsters, speaking a different language, having a deep, grisly, grumbly voice, right? And we just didn't get that with Rhoda. And it kind of reminded me of what they did in the Fantastic Four movie, where the Thing, who we're also used to hearing sound very deep voice and grumbly because he's made of rocks, sound like a regular human dude, right? But in Fantastic Four, it also worked because it really humanized the Thing and made him sound very personable so that we can relate to the character, so that we perceive him as more human rather than monster. The way, it was really cool seeing him interact with Mando and having that mutual respect, but also playing around with Grogu like a little brother almost. When he wakes up after being captured by his aunt and uncle and starts fighting back, I would never expect a fight between the Hutts to be entertaining, but they did have the aunt and uncle fighting against little nephew Rhoda, and it was actually so much fun to see them roll around and punch each other for a bit. So I mentioned the different fights earlier. I loved how you had like the raid type fight where he goes in the dark and he's just shooting and kicking people left and right, and they don't see him coming. We've seen him do similar scenes like that in the show, so we get a little bit more of that here. But then you also have him team up with Rhoda when they fight all the other monsters in the cage fight, which, by the way, the cage fight I think is modeled around the chess game that they play with the holograms. And maybe even some of those monsters are the same, but let me know if you caught that. Let me know if I'm correct on that. And I thought it was cool how they brought in that other bounty hunter to bring in Mando, because now the tables have turned. Mando's the one being captured by a bounty hunter. And despite Mando being cautious and tactical, he was still bested by this other unknown bounty hunter when he captured him and took him back to the Hutts. The hand-to-hand fight towards the end between the other bounty hunter and Mando was probably my favorite fight, when he pulls out the two swords behind his back and they just go at it with the blades. I thought that was really cool. It was kind of cool to see the two characters, the two bounty hunters, go at it because they're kind of on equal footing in terms of their abilities. So to see them go hand in hand and giving it all they got was a pretty cool match. Was it just me, or did that other bounty hunter with his shield hat remind you of Kung Lao from Mortal Kombat? Even the way he used his hat a little bit. Okay, let's talk about some of the negatives. It really relates more with some of the plot holes or plot insufficiencies. But first, you have the poison situation. So they set it up as if Mandalorian could possibly die because he gets bit with the poisonous bite on his body, and you can see the wound is affecting him to a point where he's passed out. Well, how do they deal with that? Okay, so Baby Yoda, Grogu shows up. He waves his hand and heals up the physical wound. He randomly finds some fisherman crocodile dude that's just sitting there by himself, steals the fish to feed himself, but then he comes back and a crocodile guy finds out about his buddy that's been wounded by the poison snake. He's like, oh, yeah, let's see what I got. Let me mix three things together, wrap it up in a little pouch, and give it to you. And that's just gonna magically cure the poison. Like that just felt too convenient. That just felt kind of lazy. Another thing that bothered me was that scene from Shakira when they're actually fighting those monsters in that arena, and the only protections that this, underground fighting arena set up to keep the monsters where they need to be was just like what three lines of lasers just around the very border so that they don't climb or jump out. And as soon as someone damaged one part of it, the whole thing shuts down and everyone can just jump out of there and climb out of there freely and loosely. Like that seemed to be a gross oversight. Like you're gonna have like the most dangerous creatures you could find fighting each other, and they're all giant, and who knows how high they can jump or climb. You didn't think to use some sort of force field that would cover the whole thing like a dome, or at least like a fishnet laser type mechanism where you can't go up any higher, else you get zapped. And maybe put in some protection so that it doesn't easily get damaged. I don't know. I might be splitting hairs and nitpicking here a little bit. Made me stop and think like, why would their security be so crappy? So another plot issue I had was when Mandalorian escaped after the rescue team came in and blew up the little sewer cage or whatever. The Hut said, "Hey, send out the team to go get them. Make sure they don't leave." Right, and then they send what like eight or nine droids to go get them, and they all fail because they're just droids, right? And Mandalorian makes waste of them pretty quick before he passes out. But then, like, I don't know how much time passed. It seemed like a long time where no one else was sent and he didn't seem to care. And the next time we see the Hutts, they're just asleep, right? So it's like if you knew that this guy betrayed you and you wanted him dead and you know what he's capable of, and you know Mando's just gonna go back and report to the Republic and maybe they'll take some action against him, but they didn't do anything else. They didn't send anyone else. They didn't send those giant robots. They didn't send any additional droids that they had just hanging out at the palace doing nothing. Like that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like they are supposed to be vicious. They deal with criminal underground stuff all the time. They probably deal with shady deals and backstabbing all the time. So they're probably efficient by this point on how to vanquish their enemies or prisoners if that's the goal that they have in mind. And yet they only sent a small team that failed, and that's the extent of their effort. And I just found that perplexing. And then when the Republic sends their rescue team to go get Mandalorian and to take out the Hutts, I was a little perplexed by that because Sigourney Weaver's character was talking about like, oh, we built a good relationship with the Hutts. We get a lot of good information from them. Wish you didn't burn that bridge, Mando. But they explained it away pretty quick. It was like, oh well, you're right. They're gonna turn on us anyway, so we're done with them. We have no use for them, so we'll just take them out. But we do get two cool appearances from that rescue team. We got Captain Tava, played by Paul Sun Hoon Lee. My favorite from the Kim's Convenience show. Love that guy. He's one of us. I've seen his posts, and he's got a man cave pretty much like this, full of Star Wars collectibles. So he's one of us. So I love that about him. And then you get Dave Filoni as well as one of the pilots. You also saw him earlier in kind of the base or the break area in the background wearing his hat. So that was a pretty neat little cameo as well. But yeah, you get a happy ending for Rhoda, which is great because he was kind of a likable character, right? He's a Hutt, but he's not trying to be like the other Hutts. He's a good guy at heart. They're taking him out for a drink afterwards. He says his goodbyes to Mando and Grogu, and it's a nice little ending for his character. So the pacing was kind of jarring when they had that long pause in the middle after Mandalorian got hurt and was healing. I mean, there were some cute moments seeing Grogu kind of do his own thing and taking care of him. But it just felt like it slowed the movie down too much and lasted a little too long. It's just an observation. It didn't bother me too much. It didn't take me out of the movie too much. There probably was some room to better balance the slow moments with the action. But overall, despite the pacing concerns I had and some of the things that I felt were missing, I think overall I had a lot of fun in the theater. Now, my theater was not terribly crowded on opening night. It was about three quarters filled, but it was a very respectful and conservative crowd, so there wasn't out loud cheering or applause, which I tend to like when there's higher energy in the room, but that's fine. It didn't take away from my enjoyment. I still loved all the action sequences. I loved all the little cute scenes between Grogu and Mandalorian. And I do think they succeeded in translating the charm of the show onto the big screen. And my concerns that things would get lost in that translation were pretty quickly vanquished. And I hope to see more appearances from Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't know if we are getting that, but they set it up to where they could continue their adventures. So maybe we'll see them in some form or fashion. I'll give this movie a 90%, which is pretty high. 10% for some of the little shortcomings here and there. But overall, it's such a great time and so good to see Grogu and Mandalorian back together and on the big screen. It feels great to have Star Wars back in the movie theater. I gotta say, I mean, I love the Disney Plus stuff. I love watching the shows. I think it's a great format to tell some of these stories. But there's something very exciting to see a Star Wars title on the big screen, especially in IMAX, which I got to watch and got to see all the details and special effects up close with the optimal sound and picture. So I highly recommend that. But yeah, it's a great time. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think they did a good job capturing the charm from the shows onto the big screen? What was your favorite moment? What was your most exciting fight? Because there's so many different types of fights. What were some of the concerns or issues you had? I'd love to know your comments. And as always, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, this is PK's Reviews.